Good morning, everyone. Capt. Karl Burnside here, Thumbs Up Charter Services. Sorry, got a mosquito around me. Another episode of Thumbs Up Charter Services behind the scenes, and as promised, we're finally done with the trailer and its repairs, so we are going to start repairing the transom. Don't pay attention to the name Beach Bum because she is the Ambrose, and pretty soon that'll be disappearing because we're also going to be stripping the boat here soon, hopefully within the next few weeks, and getting all this nasty house paint and everything else off of it and get it ready for some new paint. But we really need to start at the back end of this boat. The transom is the most strongest part of the boat, or should be, and we definitely do not have that with our transom anymore. Luckily, the shell of the boat, the structure, the aluminum, and the riveting I've already inspected is in great shape. So this is a matter of just simply clearing the way in the back of this boat to change the wood out that is structurally making up the transom, of which is rotted, and I think raccoons have clawed and chewed through. And then there was an attempt by somebody to do something very interesting with wood. It's an impressive nightmare, and we're going to show that to you first. We're going to kind of give you a scope of what the project's going to be, what's wrong with it, so you guys can see, and then we got to start disassembling this thing to make way for some transom repairs. So stay tuned. Ought to be fun. Hope you enjoy it. Here we go. All right, so we'll just start right back here at the back of the boat, and what we're going to have to do is we're going to take this transom cap off, this top part of the transom here. Now I've already started. I've taken the bumper or rail off the back of the boat, and you do that by simply pulling this rubber out of the channel, and then there's screws, if you can see that hook this aluminum into and through the wood of the transom. That is, if we had any wood left, because all the screws kind of fell out and the bracket came off, and it was a pretty easy project, actually. But that material, of course, will be saved. It's in good shape, and we will reinstall it. But this cap is going to have to come off. It means these cleats have got to come out. These are going to disappear, and we're going to plug up these holes. I don't want those there anymore. The light will be reinstalled, cleaned and reinstalled. Again, this rod holder, or this hole here, is going to be plugged. We're going to have downriggers across the back of this boat when we're done. This is an old ladder, okay? And used to come down the back of the boat. You can see some of the brackets right there. We're not going to have a ladder on our boat. We don't need it. Those are going to be plugged as well. And then this cleat's got to come out too, because this cleat actually bolts through two pieces of aluminum here. The top being the rear cap, and then the aluminum as it comes down the side of the gunnel right there. I think you can maybe see that second piece there, and it all bolts underneath here. So that's all got to come out. These will have to come out a little bit too, because we're going to have to pull this back, this aluminum bumper back or rail, because right here is where the cap separates from the gunnel. We got a couple rivets here to drill out. We've got a weld to cut here and across, and then this entire piece will come out for us. Okay, so there's the first thing. So yeah, we got some welds here, and we're gonna have to take this back together when we're done, because this is the strongest part of the boat. It gets a lot of force and stress on it, and it has to be exactly as it was that Starcraft made it. They weld for a reason, let's just put it that way. So then the other thing we got to do is remove all these tie-down, all this tie-down hardware, these D-rings. They've got to come out all the way down here. These screws will show you on the inside. Actually, stainless machine screws go through the transom and are bolted from the backside. We've got to take all of these out, okay? Because they're actually technically holding the plywood in to the channel on the inside that we'll show you, but they've all got to come out. We've got to save them, clean them, and reuse them. And then, of course, our gimbal assembly for our stern drive has to come out as well. That's really not too bad of a project. We'll show you on the inside there. It comes out rather easily. Then, through use of abuse, or how would you say, use and abuse over the years, you know, we had a swim platform here, as you can see. We've had a ladder that somebody put on this thing we're not going to use. And then down here, you cannot see it, but it was a very creative thing. He had probably 10 or 20 sensors literally on either side of this thing, where we have screw holes in the bottom of the transom. We're going to clean all this off. Now, it was interesting because as he took stuff out, he decided to use something like maybe marine text or something and kind of skim coat this and then paint over it for holes that he didn't want. This material is all going to come off of here. We'll grind it off. We use chemical strip or whatever because we are repainting the boat basically above the water line, but I will paint down to the very bottom of the transom here. And of course, we're going to bottom paint again. And he's got the bottom paint way too high on this thing. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like a quarter way up the side of the boat. And that's not necessary because the water line is down here. Water line is right in here. So we're going to get rid of that. We're going to paint the boat tan. We're going to match the little lady. And probably the bottom black, like the little lady with... And you got to be really careful. We're going to talk a lot about this, about what paints you use on aluminum. Because first of all, aluminum is really hard to paint. And the second thing is, there's a lot of substances that will attack aluminum. So we will go into detail about that, about what to use and what not to use. But that's all in a future segment. Right now, we're worried about the transom, and we got a lot of work to do here. But where I'm going with is all these holes down here that were put in for accessories. We will be using a pretty cool material that you use with a map torch. That's actually, it's kind of like a aluminum, I want to call it brazing stick, but it's really, it's not brazing, it's not brass, it's an aluminum fill material, and we're going to fill all those holes and grind them flush. And there's just no reason for them at all. We are going to reinstall a kicker here, but again, we got way too many holes. I mean, the guy just went crazy on this thing. So we're going to clean it up, put it together right, make her watertight, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be it's intensive labor and labor of love, I guess. So let's go on the inside and take a look around and see what we got, because that's where the horror story really starts. All right, so we're up inside the boat right now, and we're looking at the transom. And here's our cap, our transom cap. This whole thing, it comes along here, to here, up to here, and it's welded here and down. At each corner, as you saw before, we have these cleats going through. We got to take those out. There's also, you can't see it because all the paint, a rivet there, a rivet there, and I believe one under here too that we got to drill out. Is this piece meets the gunnel here. Okay, transom cap, gunnel. So we have to loosen this joint, free it, get this cleat out of the way. There were rivets. Hold on here. There were rivets down in here that I've already removed. Okay, got to cut that weld as we talked. And then we got to do the same exact thing, mirror image on the other side. There's rivets here that I've cut or drilled out. You got to cut this weld. You got to cut down here. And then these rivets here, you can actually see them, have got to come out. This trim piece for the bump rail's got to come out so we can slide this piece out. And of course, this cleat's got to come out. That whole assembly will come up and out for us. Now, I have seen several guys out there, not on YouTube, but other places, work on these boats. And what they'll do is they won't take this extra time to take this out correctly. And what they will do is they will take everything loose along the back of this boat, and they will bend right here at this crease and flip this entire piece of aluminum up just enough to get the wood in and out of the transom. That is a hack job way of doing it, I'm going to tell you right now, I would never climb in that boat and go on the Great Lakes with it. Anytime that you work metal, and aluminum is no stranger to this, when you bend it, right? What happens when you bend a curve? You guys that are old enough remember the old steel hangers, right? And you could take a hanger, straighten it out, and then bend it. What eventually happens? It breaks. So anytime that you work metal on a crease like that or a joint, you actually weaken it. It gets brittle, and we don't want that. You're talking about the strongest part of the boat. So we will do it correctly and pull this entire transom cap out as one assembly. It'll be stripped on the table of all of its paint, prepped for reinstallation. The holes will be plugged, etc., etc. So now let's go take a look at the piece of de-resistance, as I call it, which is what's left of the wood in the transom. We're going to replace all these floors in here. All this plywood is soft. But we're going to leave it for now because we need a platform to stand on. If I take it out, I don't have anything to work with. So the first thing we're going to do to gain access to this back part of the transom, we'll take a saw and cut maybe a foot back on this floor on either side to gain access so we can work. Here is the inside of your gimbal. This is actually a bracket, all right, that the gimbal on the outside bolts through, and we're going to have to take that out. We got to get the steering cable out of there still, but we're going to unbolt this. This piece pulls out, then the gimbal on the outside basically falls out. Okay, it's like 6 bolts. It's not a huge big deal. Our bilge pump situation, all this garbage is going away. Our blower fan over there, we got a new one. It's going away. All the plumbing and piping and all this will be replaced along with the electrical wiring, new float switch, etc. Bilge will be cleaned and get all that garbage out of there. But the wood, you can see somebody try to repair this. They took the time to take this all apart, and stick a piece of womanized 1/2-inch plywood here over the old wood, original transom wood, because it was rotted or whatever, and bolted the gimbal back through it. The boat was never run in this condition, and I'll show you why in a minute, and I know that because I made sure of that before I bought it, because there's implications of doing something like that. If this thing isn't completely solid, this is what holds up the rear of your engine. You've only got a mount down here on the front of the engine with 2 bolts that support the front, and the rear of this engine and driveline is completely supported by the transom. Any movement in the transom causes a multitude of problems, and I'll show you what to look for here in a minute. But you can see that the wood is rotted, it's been clawed at. We got a big hole in the floor there. But the wood slides into this, from the top, it slides into this aluminum channel. And you can see in there, you can see those bolts I showed you on the outside that go through the wood that we got to take out. Let me get my bill and my hat out of here. Come on. It got a shadow. There we go. You can see it right there. There's one of them. But it bolted all the way down here, and it slides into this piece of wood, slides in this channel that makes up the transom. The transom is going to be one solid piece of wood. You can see that channel it fits in underneath the drive down here. There it is. Comes along the bottom. And Starcraft did something really interesting here, which is cool. They kept the wood out of the water by at least probably 2 solid inches down here. See, there's your drain plug. So that was a smart move in how they designed this to try to keep it from getting soaked and wicking up water. But this guy has come in here and he's put a piece of womanized plywood, which really you shouldn't be using at all, because if it's the wrong womanized plywood, it'll eat aluminum, even though there's something out there called AC2, which is direct contact plywood. Hopefully that might be what it was. It doesn't look like it's attacked the aluminum yet. But then on this side over here, you can see he stuck another piece in and bolted one of those D-rings through it on the outside to hold, you know, one of the tie-down D-rings, but left a gigantic gap here of wood clear out to the aluminum. Just a really piss-poor job of trying to fix this boat. It's loose as a goose, I mean, I could take the end of this, I could take the back of this transom and just move it, right? So there's no structural support whatsoever. Now, how do I know that he didn't run this in this configuration? I will show you in a second. So how I know that this was a recent attempt to repair this and the thing never hit the water, you can see on the back side of the gimbal, we're on the outside of the boat. Somebody took the time to grind off the paint here, to put a new spaghetti, what we call spaghetti seal in here. We'll show you that. It fits into a channel all the way around this gimbal to seal this to the back of the boat, transom of the boat. But there's no corrosion on here. He simply wire wheeled it and then reinstalled this after he put that piece of plywood on the inside. And then the other way we know that this hasn't had any hours on it, if you have a, and this is really a good, tip when you're looking at boats, because you can see this if you look carefully on the back of the boat where the outdrive slides into the back of the engine. If you look at the splines in here, okay, when inspecting a boat at the back of the engine, all right, see how nice and clean they are. They don't have any grooves or marking or wear down, or they haven't been what we call apple cord, where you got teeth here and then all of a sudden the teeth are missing here and then you got teeth here. If you saw something like that, that would indicate that there's movement. And like I said, the transom can't move because it supports the back of the engine. So that shaft fits into this coupler on the back of the engine that is splined, okay? And when you get movement in and out, all right, you will get wear on those splines on your outdrive, okay? And we're not seeing that, and you would get it relatively quickly in the condition that transom is in. So while this was bolted in, it wasn't, the engine wasn't hooked up to anything. It was just sitting there. And you know, luckily they never tried to drive this boat down the lake like that, because they probably would have gone to the bottom. But in the event that if they did drive it, you would have seen these splines here worn away. And when you're inspecting a boat to buy it, it's one of the first things I look for. Look down the back of the engine, okay? Stick your head in there, get a bright flashlight, and you want to look at this relationship because it's exposed, see, in the engine compartment. And you want to tilt the motor, the outdrive up and down, and that'll pull the splines in and out, and you look for wear. And if you got wear there, there's a good chance that you've got a soft transom or a transom that is moving, right? That's no longer a structural component. Because this whole thing, as you can see, moves. And this is connected to that movement, and the engine is not. It's supported by the front and the back. But if you had movement in there, you would definitely have spline wear, and it would be a problem. So luckily this guy looks like didn't try to do that. It would have been an epic disaster if he did, and it's just up to us to correct it. So at least in that respect, we have that going for us. We're going to start here by simply removing these D-rings that hold for the straps that hold the boat to the trailer on either side of the transom. And I don't even need air power because they never tightened them up. So we're just going to take the bolts and washers they got on here off. And they're not lock nuts, which they should be. So this hardware is going to have to be replaced anyways. But we will reuse the D-rings when we reassemble the boats with new lock nut type hardware. And not only that, that's not even a stainless washer. So that has no business being on a boat. You use stainless hardware when you work on a boat. And so there is one of them right there ready to pull out. We'll flip to the other side. And we got a similar situation over here where nothing is fastened down. which is not surprising. And we will come in here and we will undo the nuts. And I guess in this respect, at least when the guy put it together wrong, he made life easy for me because he did everything wrong. And it's simply put, I'm going to have to go out and pull on that. So we'll tighten that wood. But we just take off all the hardware there. Go outside and pull these out now. Out on the outside of the boat, transom side, pull that D-ring out, walk over the other side, do the same thing. Gonna leave this D-ring up here for now because I've got bungee cords supporting our gimbal unit. And as we unbolt that from the inside, we're going to use these to kind of hold this in place as a third hand, if you will. And we'll pull that D-ring out up there last after we get the gimbal unit out. Let's take a little more detailed look at this apparatus on the inside of the boat. What you have here is a hydraulic pump, and this pump is connected by those hydraulic lines right here, or the ones you see through here, going down and out. Those go to your rams on the outside. That's used for your tilt and trim, okay? So raising and lowering the outdrive. What we have up here is a trim limiter, all right? And this is an old style because it's 74. They're done differently now, obviously with Maricruiser, but this is one of the original designs. And this hydraulic electric apparatus, as you can see, we got electrical wiring and hydraulic tubing, works in concert with this trim pump that it limits the amount of trim or upward movement you can give the outdrive while it's running, engine is running. Because if you tilt it too far up when the engine's running, you'll damage it. So this is part of that system that prevents that. Then here we got an exhaust pipe, comes from the engine. We'll have to remove that first to gain access to the 6 bolts or 6 nuts or 4 nuts, 2 bolts that hold this gimbal assembly together between the outside of the boat and the inside of the boat, so we can separate those pieces. But before we even do that, what we've got here is your steering cable, and we got to take this nut off. This tube stays in place because this steering cable has a stainless steel end on it that comes through the tube and bolts on right here. All right, and bolts onto this arm that actually steers the boat. So we got to take that nut off, pull this up and out of the way, and then get that nut loose and slide this cable out. I may not be able to slide the cable out right here. I'm going to try. I might have to take this whole thing loose and then pull it away and slide this out. It might be easier. But this cable is going to be replaced anyways because we're putting a brand new steering unit in it. So we will start by taking off the exhaust pipe first, and then we'll come back and get this steering cable taken care of. So this exhaust pipe is held in by 3 9/16 bolts. Later models used inverted star type bolts, or what I call really 12 points. We use a little zip gun, 3/8 impact. Come on down in here. Let me just get down into my work, shall I? Should really be using an impact socket for this, but I don't. Always wear safety glasses too. There's 2. And then the third one, let's see where it is. Might be right there. It is. There's our third. There's our exhaust pipe out of the way. Wow, look at all that nice rot. Ain't that beauty? Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is get this steering cable out of the way. That's a 9/16 bolt. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned it, but The 3 bolts that held on the exhaust pipe, they were 9/16 bolts too. And you know what? There's a gasket supposed to go here that bolted on down there, and that guy didn't even put a gasket or anything on this thing, so it would have leaked all over the place when it went in the water, and it would have sank anyway. So, brilliant. All right, so we're going to take this bolt out, and I will mention too, or this nut out, I will mention too that I like to put nuts and bolts back, you know, once you remove something, because it kind of helps in the future, 2 months down the road, when you're standing there going, where did this go, right? So let's see if we can get this out of here. And this is the factory bolt, I could tell, because it's a lock nut. I keep saying bolt, it's a nut. Just remember it's a nut. There we go. Nylock nut, probably. Okay, so one thing we're missing here, there should be a stainless washer underneath this. Should be a washer, and then the nut goes on this shaft. And it's missing, so we'll have to put that back once we get the transom repaired. But I've done this so many times, it's just old hat, you know? You know what's there or not. So, okay, our tiller arm that controls or steers the outdrive is released from the steering cable itself. You can see this slides in this tube here, and like I said, this tube stays in place. Just got to come over to the other side and release the cable itself. We'll do that right now. Hopefully you guys can see that. Here we go. Tight. There it goes. Wow. Oh yeah, this thing's all frozen on here. Yeah, that ain't moving anymore for us, is it? Okay. We've got it loose. This should slide or move on this, but it's not because it's locked with corrosion. So what we'll probably have to do is unbolt this whole assembly, pull it out, and then spin it off just to get it out of the way, but it is loose. So we'll have to take care of that in a minute. Okay, so the next thing we're going to have to do is this shift cable. This is a shift cable that goes outside of the gimbal that actually shifts the outdrive. We're going to have to release that from this because obviously we couldn't pull it through if we left the cable attached to it. So there's a cotter pin here. If we could slide it up and get it out of here. Where are my adjusters? I think these adjusters will work. It's got to be all new hardware anyway, so when I put them back together, never reuse cotter pins, right? Learned that from another episode I had. Right, so that's loose there. I just got to take this nut off from the shift mechanism. Once we get that off, that'll be clear. And they did put the washer behind this nut, which is good. Let's see if we can just get it to spin for us. Here we go. There we go. Whole bunch of adjustments on this when we put it back together, and we'll definitely show you all that stuff about how to make sure it shifts and goes in and out of gear. Okay, so this cable comes out with the gimbal on the outside. We'll just lay it down there. We'll put our washer and nut back on the shift arm or lever so we don't lose it. Kind of like that. Then we've got this other shift cable here. I'm just going to pull it loose with it and leave it on for now. We got new cables anyways, but we could pull it out, at least get it loose. So the next step is, I was wrong, it's not 6, it's 8. It's 8 nuts and bolts. Let me make sure you can see this entirety. You have two lower studs, 1, 2. You have 2 bolts above it, there and there. 2 more studs with nuts, there and there. And then you have 2 final bolts here and here. And they've all got to be removed, so this will pull out. Okay, another thing we've got to remove is on these 2 hydraulic lines here going outside underneath the exhaust manifold or port. These 2 hydraulic lines go to the trim cylinders. One comes up here, right there, to that shift switch. The other goes to the motor, and we're going to have to remove those because those got to slide out just like that shift cable with the outside part of the gimbal, and we're going to do that right now. All right, so if you remember the past session from doing brake lines, first thing you're going to want to do is loosen this guy with a flare wrench so you don't damage the fitting, even though we're going to be replacing all this stuff. Oh, he's already loose. That was easy. We're going to lose some hydraulic fluid here, maybe. I don't know. Because of what the guy did here, it looks like he didn't even install that thing completely. So, okay, that one's undone. Now I got to reach underneath the pump where you're not going to see and do the same thing and back that one out. Pull both lines out free so they can exit through the transom when we loosen all the bolts up and remove the bolts for the gimbal housing and drop that thing off the back of the transom. So one of the last things you probably will want to do, this tiller arm goes out with the gimbal out the back. We've got our hydraulic lines loose, there they are, along with the shift cable to the outside all ready to be pulled through. Got that loose from the pump. It wasn't tight either. So that's how I know this guy wasn't driving this thing anymore, thank gosh. But take this steering arm off because this is going to hang up going through there. And it is just a 9/16. Again, it's the factory lock nut, and he does have a washer underneath it, surprisingly. Again, take it out, take your washer, take your nut, screw it back on so you know where everything is. Alright, and now we are ready, it looks like, to take all the bolts out that clamp these 2 pieces together and take the gimbal off the back of the boat. So we will get our little 3/8 zip gun, hopefully this will do it, and take out all these nuts and bolts that hold this thing together. Two top bolts. One of the, it's got stuck in my socket. Oh, come on now, just go. There we go. One of the nuts, another one of the nuts. Take that out. Okay. 2 more bolts. We put the wrong bolts in here. Yep, those are not stainless bolts. Those have to be. Started powder corroding. And then, wow, we got some really big bolts on the bottom. Looks like they're 11/16, so I'll be right back. All right. So our final 2 bolts are down here on the bottom. They're actually 3/4. Brought out the big gun for this one.
That one. And there is a washer on this, if we can get it off. There we go. Put some type of sealer on here. Oh, okay. Let's get the other one off. Great, and now it's spinning too. That's just fantastic. These bolt in from the other side. Oh, there we go. They're kind of like stove bolts. They have a square head on them, and it moved back, but I think we're getting it here. We'll show you that. All right, yeah, we got it. Good deal. All right, so now technically this whole inner bracket is free from the outer gimbal assembly. What we'll have to do now, we get it here, is give it a little persuasion in certain spots to get her free. Watch your wiring harnesses. And it's coming pretty free. Wow, look, the whole transom moves with it. Go figure. How fun. Alright. There we go. It's free. Watch your trim switch wiring. Those are for the sensors on the outside that show where your trim is. Or sensor, I should say. On this one, it only has one. Newer ones have two. Come on. Let's go out through the hole. Don't tear the wiring. There we go. Get that up and out of the way. And, alright, she's completely free. Pull all your shift cables and hydraulic lines through. Time to move to the outside of the boat and take the gimbal off outside. We'll come back and finish this up in a minute. Alright, here we are at the outside of the boat. This thing should pop right out for us. Gotta be careful with it. I've got some bungees here and things. I don't get hit in the face if they let go, but just gently pry. Don't bend up your aluminum. Put a block of wood behind it if you need. Wow, this is just terrible. And kind of pop her out. And wiggle back and forth. Get her to go. So you don't want to bend anything up too bad that you can't fix. Man, oh man. This is ugly. There she goes. You just got to take your time. When you get it far enough, you might be able to wiggle it. Take this bungee off before I have a huge accident here. It is definitely jammed in here. It's coming though. There it goes. Oh, there it is. All right. Set it down on the ground. We're going to take this gimbal and completely rebuild it with new hydraulic lines, hoses, go completely through it. New gimbal bearing, if you've ever heard of that. There it is. Still got our plate on the inside we have to spin the cable off of. Maybe I'll just cut it because we're replacing it. But she's completely out, and you can just see how bad that transom is. So now that we've got this completed, our next videos will be taking out all these bolts, taking off the cap of the transom, gaining access to what we need to gain access to. The fun has begun. Until next time, Captain Karl Burnside from Thumbs Up Charter Services, where we are wild for walleye Want to go for a charter? 810-513-6073. Visit us on the web, thumbsupcharter.com. Visit us on Google at Thumbs Up Charter Services in Seaboing or Bayport, 2 words, Bayport, Michigan. Or on Facebook at Thumbs Up Charter Services. Hope you enjoyed the video. We'll be back soon with more. Take care, folks. Have a great weekend.